You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, Barb and Star go to Vista del Cherry in 2021. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. When we'll have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Thomas Mariani, and my biggest accomplishment wasn't dying.
And I am Adam Thomas, and I just want to know if the seagulls on the beach can hear my prayer.
I mean, that's what we all really want to know. It's the eternal question that all men must face.
Yep. Thomas, are we official? Would you call us official?
I don't know if I'd quite call us official, but I have many strong feelings toward you.
Oh, okay. Well, all right.
You're gonna go dance on the beach real quick and climb up
Yep.
palm tree like a cat up a palm tree.
That's thinking about climbing a palm tree.
Well, we'll get into all of that in a second, but welcome everybody to the Double-Edged Double Bill, where every week Adam and I cover a good and a bad feature related to a topic that we decide on here. And, every year, about midway through and then at the end of the year, we like to talk about just movies that came out this year. We don't usually get a chance to cover movies from the specific year we're recording in. We've already done one this year, though, like Psycho Goreman. But otherwise, We've mostly been keeping the newer movies to our early plug, our Patreon, patreon.com/DEDBpod. We have a show On the Edge of Relevance, where we talk about modern movies. We've done about 9 episodes of that so far. We'll continue to do throughout the year, to talk about some newer releases. But, much like 2020, 2021's also been a very interesting year in films, though particularly, at least in this case, we've both gone to the theater again for the first time in a while. When we talked about Fast 9 on the show, that was at least your first movie in theaters.
Yeah, correct. And only movie in theaters so far. I plan on going this upcoming weekend. Hint for anybody. Maybe something's happening. But it's been a wild year, man. I don't know if it's been a good year for movies yet, to be fair.
Yeah, I think much like 2020, a lot of the interesting ones are sort of like a bit more hidden. You gotta kind of find them amongst some of the glut of streaming releases necessarily. But it's been interesting going back to the movies. I've been roughly about, honestly, 5 or 10 times, honestly, just because I got that AMC Stubs thing back, and I've been able to go and have fully vaccinated, which, by the way, we'll have a spot for the ESO Network. We've been playing for a while about that, but we recommend everybody, if you haven't, please do.
Yeah, because, I would like to go back to the theater without being terrified for my life.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
And that's the major concern. All about Adam, not about the well-being of other human beings, whatever.
Nope, Adam wants to go back to this show.
That's exactly why. But I don't know, I think it's a very transitional time as well, just because even the movies that have come out so far in theaters and have, grossed a lot of money. I'm curious, Adam, do you know what is the highest grossing movie so far, at least domestically? Because if we go internationally, it's a lot of, the Chinese market has had a lot of, big movies that have come out and made more than most of the big, international releases. But of the domestic box office, highest grossing, what do you think?
Is it Black Widow?
It is not Black Widow, that's number 3.
Fast 9, then?
No, that's number 2.
I don't know.
That's interesting. It's by a matter of about $200,000. Separates Fast 9 and the number 1 movie.
Oh, well, shit. I have no idea, dude.
It's A Quiet Place Part 2.
Oh, yeah. I did know that. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah, it's 154.0 something versus 153.8, basically. It's a million. It's that thin a margin. But so yeah, that one's been the biggest sort of unrequited success compared to also with the international box office and stuff. It's been interesting because with Fast 9, and we're recording this when the results for Black Widow's second weekend have come out, both have had major dips, more so than some of the other ones in their franchises. So it's curious. It's it's a bit of like, obviously we're still in the middle of the pandemic, there's a lot of issues going on with that, but also maybe people aren't as hesitant to like go to the theater multiple times with some of those movies.
Well, that too, and plus with Black Widow, you got to figure the Disney Premier Access is available, so a
Right.
lot of people are probably watching it at home. And then with Fast 9, I generally think it's just kind of franchise fatigue as well.
Right, it was interesting. Disney, for the first time ever, released their Premier Access numbers, and it was like in theaters the opening weekend it made about 80 million, and on streaming it was 60.
Wow.
So there's a lot to like sort of analyze with that, but regardless, we're here more to talk about two completely separate movies, neither of which came out in theaters, that have a bit of an interesting edge to both of them. We'll be talking about the bad pick that Adam ended up picking last time, which was Cherry, which is available on Apple TV Plus. And then the good pick is Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, which was for a while on like VOD. That's where I originally saw it back in like April or so. But now it's streaming on Hulu.
Yeah.
Yes, and also keep in mind, everybody, because these are newer movies, we don't usually do spoiler warnings, but it's probably appropriate for this time. We're going to go into full spoilers with both of these, starting with Cherry.
I'm 23 years old, and sometimes I wonder if life was wasted on me. I take all the beautiful things to heart, till I about die from it. If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing... Hey, I'm really happy you're here.
Why is that?
Because I like you. But there never seems to be enough time to do. You're it for me.
I feel the same way.
I joined the army.
Why would you do that?
Sometimes I feel like I've already seen everything that's gonna happen. And it's a nightmare.
So, Cherry came out on February 26th of this year, from directors Anthony and Joe Russo, who are mostly known for, some smaller movies that have come out recently, like Avengers Endgame. I don't know if you saw that one, Adam, or Infinity War. They're like smaller independent films.
No, I haven't seen those yet. What are they about?
It's like an ensemble cast thing. It's kind of like Robert Altman-y. Just like a bunch of...
Yeah, I'm good.
No. So this is the first thing the Russos have done since they were big people with Marvel. They did Captain America the Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War and the last two Avengers movies. So with those alone, they have a box office gross of over like $3 billion, basically. Between...
Yeah, they're kind of big deals.
Right, but even then, before that, to give them credit, they were also very big TV guys. Like, they directed the pilots for both Community and Arrested Development, and they were big producers on both those shows, and so they've been around for quite a while. Their only movies prior to their Marvel work, though, were like a movie called Welcome to Collinwood that was like a George Clooney executive produced movie nobody's seen, and also the infamous You, Me, and Dupree with Owen Wilson.
Oh boy.
So not as much, but the movie career is incredibly varied, from incredibly minor bomb disasters to the biggest movies of all time. But Cherry is their first sort of big drama. It's based on a novel by Nico Walker, who apparently it's very autobiographical about his life, where he was in the military and then came back, had PTSD, and became a drug addict. And it stars Tom Holland, which is also notable because it's his first sort of big dramatic turn, because obviously most people know him as Spider-Man. No, this isn't the guy who directed Child's Play. It's a different guy. Everybody.
Oh, that would be amazing.
But this very sort of like gritty, grounded drama, sort of their attempt to be taken more seriously with the Russos and Tom Holland. And Adam, this was your pick. And does it fit the bad category? Does it?
Well, drama, I don't think even like sort of encapsulates what they're trying to do with this movie. This is a downer of a movie for several reasons. Subject material, and it's a terrible movie. I mean, did they take the Russos have no style or substance to heart in this movie, or what? I mean, they try so many different camera tricks and filters and all this weird warping shit, and I mean, it's almost like painful to watch. It's so many different types of styles crammed together constantly.
Yeah, that's the big thing with it is, even though those movies made so much money, There have been some criticism from Marvel naysayers about how, like, oh, their movies kind of have, like, a very flat color palette, a lot of it looks gray. Like, a lot of people point to the Civil War big airplane battle and how it looks kind of gray, which as much as I am a fan of those Marvel movies, I tend to agree that they don't have the most diverse color palette, especially considering you got stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy, particularly Volume 2 and some other things that actually show off the more diverse visual range. Versus, I think the Russo brothers, in their style, tend to be guys who, like, are competent directors, but extremely good producers. That's what their Marvel movies really feel like. It's kind of like getting everybody together and balancing them out very well. Feels it's more like their producerial brains working. And I think that's the thing when watching Cherry, is it does feel like they sort of took those accusations to heart and decide, we're going to make something that's really ambitious and stylized and wild. It's going to be like a weird Oliver Stone movie. Almost, there's a lot of points where it feels like that. It's kind of like, hey, let's do a combination of Born on the 4th of July and Natural Born Killers. And what ends up coming out is feels less like a movie made by people who have made like literal like multi-billion-dollar grossing movies, and more like Apple gave $40 million of this budget to a bunch of first-time filmmakers. Because it just feels like, let's try everything, because we're just at a film school, as opposed to, you guys are, like, in your mid-40s and you're doing this bullshit. It feels really, really taxing.
Yeah, you know what it reminded me of, man? Like, I know you've seen it. There's episodes of Bob's Burgers that have done it. There's a Night of the Living Dead version that came out where, they get like 30 different people to do 30 different styles in the course of one episode or one movie, where there'll be different animation or different drawings or different whatever.
Or they're even like projects on YouTube and stuff where it's like, let's recreate Shrek, but let's do like every scene's a different style of animation, that kind of thing.
That's what this movie almost feels like, dude. It's pretty well acted. Like, Tom Holland's really trying in it. It's just he doesn't fit the character for me at all.
He is woefully miscast.
Woefully miscast.
Stephen Dorff recently had those comments about Black Widow where he's like, oh, I'm embarrassed for Scarlett Johansson or whatever. This is embarrassing. This is legit incredibly embarrassing for Tom Holland, who just... I feel so bad, especially there are points where, like, Jack Rayner's character, who plays this drug dealer that encounters him, tries to say, like, hey, did you get all the stuff out of my fucking safe? You took all those drugs? And he's like, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. And it's like, you're just doing Spider-Man. You look, and now you sound like the 16-year-old kid who we watch in the fucking Marvel movies.
1,000%. And, one of my favorite things ever is that they age, supposedly, Tom Holland 14 years in this movie. Oh, he just has longer hair and a fucking mustache. But it's still Tom Holland.
Well, especially, like, at that point, this is the end of the movie after, like, they show him incarcerated. And it's like, keep in mind, he's gone through both war and, like, all this drug addiction.
He's supposed to be almost 40 at this point.
And Tom Holland was actually 23. Like, the character is supposed to be 23 throughout most of it. And he actually was that age. And he doesn't even look that age, unfortunately, because he still looks like fucking high schooler Spider-Man. So they try and age him up even more. And the ending shot is really him getting out of prison and going over to his girlfriend. And he just gives this smile at the end. That's the literal last shot of the movie. And it's just like, oh, these are, one, fake mustache. Two, it looks like digital wrinkles. And it's just like, guys... Woof.
For sure. And they definitely put, like, liver spots on his hands and stuff.
Oh, my God. It's so bad.
It's so bad.
It's disastrous.
Through all of this awful shit, true love carries through, man. And I really, that's the message that you need.
I've mentioned I feel bad for Tom Holland. Also, Sierra Bravo, who plays, like, his girlfriend Emily throughout the whole thing, also just looks so young. Like, she looks even younger than Holland in a way. She's like, you two are like babies. And it's just like, oh, we're going through the thick of it.
She's really good in it too. Like, that's the thing, they do put in good performances. It's just they're so miscast. They're both so ridiculously miscast to where, like I said, you're supposed to believe that these two now have been together for over 2 years and now they're junkies and all this shit. And it's like, they literally both look like if they just took a shower and cut their hair, they'd be fine. Like, they look like they're like 14. Like, they just try to be so emotionally manipulative in this movie. And ultimately, I came away from it not giving a fuck about anybody in it. Like, I did not give a fuck about any of the characters. Look, and what my favorite thing is too, I know heroin dealers are like villains and stuff in real life because, it's heroin. It's a drug that kills people. But the fucking one guy is like a super villain. Like, black in his car.
Yes.
Like, he's literally a super villain. He's got like half a skull tattooed on his face, and you barely see him, and he's got this car with all these. He looks like a goddamn like fat Dracula driving around.
He looks like he could have just been out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, unfortunately.
Yeah, 100%.
He's Crossbones' evil brother come back for revenge after Civil War.
Yeah, you're right. Dude, it's so dumb, and honestly, it's so overtly long too.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours 25 minutes or so.
Oh, they could have taken 40 minutes out of this easily. There's so much padding, especially when you get to the back third. It's just get this over with.
Especially because like they literally segmented into parts, which by I believe was like part 4 or 5 when that popped up. I'm just like, oh my fucking god.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm like, oh no, like still.
Definitely a movie where you pull up the time bar, just like, oh god, we have like another hour of this left.
I literally did that. I paused it. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to get up, make something to eat real quick. I probably don't have much longer, so I better pause it before it's over. 1 hour, 15 minutes left. I'm like, oh, fuck me, man. Like, what is... Come on. And then, talking about facial hair, all right, what was with Thomas Lennon? Like, what the fuck? And then he's credited as playing his dad.
The credits are very confusing too, because the big thing is like so much of the stylistic thing with the Russos as well is that they have it from the perspective of the name of Tom Holland's character is supposed to be Cherry, which one is such like a dumb title and such a dumb character name, and also they do the title drop where he kind of gets the idea of just like, oh, looks like you dropped your cherry during the war battle bit. Dumb. But there's so many times where like they'll cut to somebody and their little thing on their desk will say like Dr. Whomever, or when they do go to the bank it says like bank fucks America, this kind of thing. And so much of like there's so much of Tom Holland's narration that's about him kind of like being like above it all and like, oh, I'm getting this Purple Heart, I didn't do anything, I only survived.
Which, by the way, they drop that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like he does it in the beginning until he gets out of the army, and then they basically don't do it again, except for one scene where he's robbing a bank,
right?
And that's it.
But there's still a lot of like him talking to the camera and the narration, all this stuff. It's so obnoxious in a way that feels like it wants to be like, oh, we're doing a interesting analysis of this character and his worldview, and really it just feels like this is some fucking Catcher in the Rye fan fiction, quite frankly.
Oh, dude, yeah, 1,000%. And the thing is, look, I'm not a veteran. I never served,
right?
And we all know that veterans do go through a lot of hardships when they get out, when they're come home and stuff, when their deployment ends and everything.
Right, like Nico Walker, who wrote the novel and everything, and I'm sure there's a lot of
Nico Walker, who wrote the novel, sure, 100%. But this just, I mean, it's just a mean, ugly, spiteful movie.
And it trivializes a lot of, like, those concerns we're talking about. Like, I kind of mentioned A Born on the 4th of July. That's at least an actual thoughtful look at what a veteran coming back from all of that is, like, actually experiencing. This, because it's so over-stylized, it just feels like it's trivializing all the important stuff.
Let's put it this way. I did not expect this movie to go in certain ways it did, because I really didn't know much about it. I didn't look up much about it, and I kind of wanted to go in cold. One thing, the trailers are completely tonally different than what the movie is. The trailers almost make it look like it might be a little bit of a comedy in some parts and everything. It is definitely not. But, he's addicted to Oxycontins and shit like that, and she's yelling at him and screaming at him in the bathtub and everything. And then, like, literally 5 minutes later, they're both on heroin now. And I'm like, what is going on? How did this jump happen?
I mean, there's so many jumps, though, at the same time. Like, even the trailer's trying to sell this, I think, just more concerned. Like, we don't know how to quite sell this, because it jumps so many different genres, where it's like, oh, look, we're like a small, intimate, romance movie in college. Eventually it goes to, like, oh, when we're in the middle of basic training, it becomes Full Metal Jacket, and it becomes, like, the Hurt Locker when they're in the middle of the war battlefield, and then a lot of it, like, that back half when they're on drugs is so much like, oh, it's like Sid and Nancy, so many of these, like, living in the filth of these, like, people, like, who are strung out and all this other shit. It's, like, just shifts so many times, because I think it's like we talked about, it's the Russos trying so hard to be taken seriously by, like, look, we can do all these different things. It's like, why don't you just pick one genre and actually dedicate yourself to it, or one stylistic choice, as opposed to just doing everything? It makes every single one of your choices feel like it doesn't matter when you're just switching like that constantly.
And, there's actually a part in the movie that really sort of sums up exactly what you just said, where they just don't really, they're just half-assed in everything. When the one guy, the drug dealer, the kid from Midsummer, Pills and Coke or whatever.
Yeah, Jack Rayner.
We never found out how he got shot. Doesn't matter. What?
It's such a weird thing, yeah, where, like, he's in the middle of the bank robbery, and then he leaves, and then they're, like, trying to get away, and then about 5 minutes later they find him, and he's apparently been shot, I guess, by the police is the implication. I don't know, it's still just poorly put together, and it's like they have to dump his body, and there's no real consequences to that.
There's no consequences.
Yeah, especially when, like, I know Nico Walker apparently did go to jail and everything for robbing several banks, but it's just, like, this guy's so reckless he shows his face all the time, and no one's really caught him after so many times he's robbed fucking banks. He's still in the same goddamn town. He's even moved different towns.
Yeah, I know. He lives in the same house, drives his own vehicles and shit to rob these banks, wears his own clothes, and it's young little Tom Holland. Nobody else looks like this kid. At least that's old enough to be robbing banks, unless, they start campus in high schools, and maybe you'll find him, or somebody who looks like him. But it's just... It's a stupid movie.
To go back to Tom Holland, actually, I want to, like, have a bit more of a discussion, because Holland, he'd been acting as a child in other things like The Impossible, the Ewan McGregor movie. He was the little kid of the Ewan McGregor, Naomi Watts, and obviously he became Spider-Man, and we all fell in love with him in Civil War and all these other, like, Spider-Man movies. He's been a very popular Spider-Man. I think he, quite frankly, is going to have such a struggle to really progress out of the MCU. Or, like, just do something different. Because I think he's a very talented in those parts, like, in the Spider-Man stuff and some other things. But between, like, this and Chaos Walking, which was, like, this infamous movie that got delayed so long and was reshot several times and just came out to nothing during the pandemic.
And then Uncharted coming.
Eventually. I mean, that's another one where it's just like, maybe, who knows, he's going to be there with Mark Wahlberg, who was supposed to be the main character at a certain point.
What was the other Netflix one? The Devil All the Time or something like that?
That one came out during the pandemic as well. One of those that was, like, briefly popular and then left. And for the record, very bad movie. Did not like it whatsoever. What sticks out is Robert Pattinson going full, like, King of the Hill character. And he's, like, the best part of that movie. It's really fun. But otherwise, yeah, I just don't know, like, how do you think this guy can progress forward? Because I think he's going to have more of, like, between other Spider-Men, I think he's going to have more of the Tobey Maguire thing, where, like, he'll be in some things but kind of fizzle, as opposed to Andrew Garfield, who took the failure of those movies and just, like, I'm going to do weird shit.
Yeah, I'm doing just weird shit and be really good in it. Yeah, or even, like, someone you mentioned already, even Robert Pattinson, who, post-Twilight kind of did a bunch of junk, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this guy's great, because then he's like, no, I'm just going to do cool shit. I don't see Tom Holland being able to do that. It's not that he's not talented. I do think he's really talented. I just don't see him having sort of the natural gravitas to do other types of work other than, like, sort of the peppy guy and stuff. I mean, could he? Probably, but I just don't think it's going to work out for him. I don't think he's going to get these roles, and especially because everything he's done, except for the Marvel work, has bombed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all been critically sort of destroyed, and they've been bombs and just delays after delays, and I just don't see it working for him, unfortunately.
I think that's the thing. He has sort of the curse of, like, a young DiCaprio, when especially he tried to, like, really bounce off being the teen idol, and it was just like, no, you still look like a kid in, like, adult clothing, even though DiCaprio's a much better actor. I think Holland's going to have a very similar problem with just, like, being able to really go forward, especially when, like, he's trying to balance off. Like, there's some pretty good people who are able to kind of be that kind of scummy. Like, I would say one of the few people who I think is well cast, and I wish there was more of, is James Gandolfini's son, Michael Gandolfini, as his cousin Joe dude, who's, like, actually pretty good whenever they give him something to do, and he's, like, very, like, like, slimy and intimidating way. It's like, man, you could be like your dad if you keep this up. But yeah, it just feels like anytime he's against, like, them, or the weird connecting factor of our movies, Damon Wayans Jr.
What was the point of that?
He plays like a drill sergeant, so I just kept thinking, like, are you stepping into your dad's Major Payne shoes?
Yeah, and he does it for one scene.
For one scene. Like, that's the thing, like, at least he has a confidence, though, as opposed to, Tom Holland looks like he is, I don't know if I quite agree with you that it's a good performance, because it's not just the miscasting, I just think he looks terrified the entire time, in a way that just feels like, oh, it's like a baby bird put into, like, weird clothing. It's just like, let this baby bird go free.
I think that might be what they're trying to say, though.
Mm-hmm.
There's even the scene where he's like, oh, it just feels like I'm playing soldier, and they show him in, like, big clothes and all that stuff. I think that's basically what they're getting at this movie, that this kid was, in no way should have been, a combat medic, and he couldn't handle it. And look what happened to this poor, basically innocent kid. And look at what's happened to him now, this poor scared little child, and now he's a horrible degenerate, you know, thief and a drug addict, and oh, look what happens to, you know, people in the military. And it's like, yeah, that does happen to some people, not all people, first of all. Second of all, the thing is, this movie's not even, and I know it sounds crazy, but stick with me here, it's not even heavy-handed enough, this movie. Like, I could see if it was super heavy-handed like Jarhead was back in the day and stuff like that. It's not even that. This movie just, like you said, it just mixes all these different genres and styles and everything. And it's just, go along for the ride. And no, like, your message isn't even clear what you're trying to say. And yet I'm watching it for 2.5 fucking hours. Like, what are you trying to tell me here?
Because you could make a heavy-handed version. It's like, I keep pointing this movie up, but like, A Born on the 4th of July talks about a lot of these things, and even has like, they do that with like, oh, we're gonna get Tom Cruise in the 80s, like beautiful, like young, attractive Tom Cruise, and turn him into, you know, what the military like churns out with like veterans. In that case, that's a more believable thing, because there's an actual solid vision of like, we go from idyllic like pre-Vietnam like suburbia that he lived in into like the post-Vietnam era where everyone's spitting on him as opposed to actually blaming the system that totally destroyed him. Like, this movie's trying to do that, but it's trying to do it through all these stylistic flourishes as opposed to any kind of soul.
It's not handled well. I mean, at all. It's almost like they got this, like you said, like something like Born on the 4th of July, this real sort of like poignant look at what the military and what the government does to these people who enlist, and how it kind of just spits them out and forgets about them. But it's almost handled with like kids' gloves, to where it's like, well, we don't really want to get into it too much, but look how cool this red filter is. Like, okay, well, great.
Yeah, it's this weird thing when you especially get like the Russos to direct it. It sort of turns this story that has a lot of potential and palpable kind of like tragedy and emotion to it, and they give it all of like the kind of middling sort of conflict of like a Captain America Civil War, where it's just like, oh, there's like so much potential to this like conflict, but really it's just kind of like, it's more about, I guess it's kind of cool and fun. We don't really care about the actual like character battling of sorts. In this case, like a more emotional battle. There's like nothing there. There's no real heart to it.
But Tom Holland comes out of prison as a damn near 40-year-old man in a pea coat and a mustache, so yeah.
I'll never get over how that's their final fucking shot.
Dude, it's ridiculous. It's so stupid. You know, you gotta post it on Twitter. Just that.
Oh, it's gonna be the image. Like, I'll have the two images of like one from Barb and Star and one from Cherry. It's gonna be that for sure. It's gonna be that. But you know what? We're gonna talk about a good movie in a second. Let's go and do final thoughts, Adam, on Cherry. What's your cherry on top for Cherry?
It's overly long. It's boring. It doesn't commit to anything it's trying to really do. It's completely miscast pretty much all around for the most part. There are a couple, you know, examples of really good character actors in it, like you mentioned Gandolfini's son and things like that. But overall, it's a movie that's trying to make you feel bad and trying to make you depressed and trying to really make you take a look at inside and how you feel about, you know, these sort of issues and everything. And it just fails miserably. I was depressed because I watched it, not because of the movie. Like, it's so long and boring and dull and drab, in a movie that's filled with, you know, stylistic choices and everything. That's probably the worst sort of compliment you can give it. With everything they try to do and all the different camera tricks, it's still boring and drab looking. It's just, nah, fuck this movie.
I love that it's so like stylized in a very dumb way that the initial like posters were brought out by Variety. They were posted, and it was like misprinted where it looked like Shirk, right? And everyone was like, "What the fuck is this?" But in retrospect, it kind of fits the movie because like it's so weirdly stylized and stupid that you're just like, "What are you trying to say to me?" Like it's weirdly fitting that they had that misprint, because this movie is such like you mentioned, very poor attempt at trying to get to like real emotional like places and trying to like be a like comment on so much about like, oh, the Russo brothers and their like these motherfuckers, especially whenever they're interviewed for like whether it's Endgame and talking about all sorts of bullshit that's just like, I don't care about your other story things, your movie was great, stop talking about it and ruining it. Or with this movie where they're just like, oh, it's really about the opioid epidemic, and it's like, really, guys? It's not really that much about the opioid epidemic at all, because that's like one sliver of this weird mess of a movie. There's so much of a mess. It just feels like they don't know what they're aiming for, and because of that, it really affects somebody like a poor Tom Holland or Sierra Bravo, anyone else in this cast who's just like, I don't know where I'm supposed to really go here. To the point where it's just like, I think they need to just stop directing movies for a bit and maybe just stick to being a producers. Because, like, I think that's what they're very talented at. It's just kind of like corralling people, basically, and giving, like, everybody a fair shake, as opposed to, in this case, it just feels like, it's like I mentioned, it's so amateurish. In a way, it just feels like you're just trying to test out different stylistic things you can do that you weren't able to do with Marvel, instead of doing something like that actually speaks to any of these interesting ideas you're talking about. It is definitely, like, one of the worst of the year. For me, I mean, there's some contenders. I've seen some pretty bad things, but this is like very much bottom of the barrel crap.
I haven't seen a lot this year, but this is definitely the worst one I've seen so far, for sure.
Yeah, but before we continue on to a good movie from this year, let's hear a promo for an ESO shaking you up right after hours.
We're the Con Guys, coming to you straight from the nerdy heart of Hollywood, California. We are your home for news, opinions, and interviews from the world of Comic-Cons and fandoms, your ultimate insiders for all things con!
Alright, and we're going to turn the mood up. We're going to have a lot of smiles because we'll be talking about the comedy Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar.
Hey, Barb.
Yes, Star.
You know what I just love?
What?
Movie trailers.
Me too!
I like how they're little movies about another movie before a different movie.
Sometimes I find myself watching a trailer for a movie while I'm watching a totally different movie.
What? Me too! Barb, what if we had a movie?
What? Then we'd have to have a trailer.
Oh, gosh. I can almost see our trailer now.
I'm Star, short for Starbra.
Assume yours is Barbara.
Nope, just Barb. Plain old Barb.
What is she drawing?
I hope she gives me bigger teeth. Love big teeth. She loves big teeth. Even if it's just two eyes on a bunch of teeth.
It would be so nice.
I'm Barb, and this is Star.
Room number again, please, sir?
611.
6'11"? Oh my... Barb. Oh my gosh, he's 6'11". 6'11"? We're in 124.
So, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar is a comedy that came out February 12th, 2021, mostly digitally. It was supposed to come out last summer in 2020, but it ended up going to, like, premium VOD because of the COVID pandemic, and it is directed by Josh Greenbaum, who I found out mostly did documentaries before this. Like, he directed the documentary about the Dana Carvey show, the Too Funny to Fail, which is a pretty good documentary on Hulu, I'd recommend. But this is his first narrative feature, and it's written and stars both Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo, who were both nominated for Bridesmaids previously. And obviously, Kristen Wiig was the star of that. Annie also appeared in the movie briefly. She's the lady on the plane who Kristen Wiig talks to, and she's just, like, super nervous and thinks that everyone's gonna die.
Yep.
And so this is sort of a vehicle for them, and this is apparently based on characters they created when they were part of the Groundlings, the Barb and Star characters, who are really these two, like, middle-aged women who live in the middle of, I forgot, was it, like, Idaho, like some Midwestern town?
Yeah, I think it is Idaho. Yeah.
Right, and they're kind of like very, they're like, oh, don't you know, those kind of voices, and they're kind of like live very humdrum lives, but they're very positive, but they realize, like, you know what, we really need to, like, reinvent ourselves and go out there. Let's go to Vista Del Mar, which is this town in Florida that they decide to have, like, a fun vacation at, and while they're there, they intersect with a weird, like, Austin Powers villain, who's also played by Kristen Wiig, and her plans to destroy Vista Del Mar with the help of her potential companion slash one of a couple henchmen, played by Jamie Dornan. And this is a movie I picked. I think it's very fun and lively and one of my favorites of the year. Adam, you hadn't seen it before. What do you think of Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar?
The thing about Barb and Star, this movie is fucking nuts. Like,
Yep.
it is nuts. Talk about, in our last movie, how they don't really commit to anything. They commit to everything in this movie. Like, every little joke, everything. They don't, if it works or not, it doesn't matter because they just are full bore into it. It is this. I've never seen anything like this movie. It's pure, just sort of chaotic, just wonderful, silly it's nuts. I mean, it's fucking nuts. Kristen Wiig and I'm sorry, what is her name? I have a hard time pronouncing it, so I forget it.
Yeah, I'm not. We apologize if we mispronounce the name. It's Annie, and it's spelled Mumolo. We'll go with Mumolo, I think.
That's probably wrong, but whatever.
Apologies to Andy, who I'm sure is a regular listener all the time.
Yes. Kristen Wiig and Mumolo, they're so good, and they have such fun chemistry, not only with each other, but pretty much with anybody in the movie. But the MVP who oozes chemistry with absolutely every other person they interact with is Jamie Dornan. Jamie Dornan, this is like, I mean, it's not going to be because it's this movie, but this should be a star-making turn for him. He's so fantastic in this movie. Not only has he got the looks and he's got the Irish accent, and he can play a real good, capable romantic lead, or you'd see him kind of doing anything. But this dude is fucking fully committed to the silly too. Like, he is all about just going for it and doing whatever is thrown at him. I mean, guys, in the middle of the movie, there's a 3.5 minute long music video of his character. It's talking about, seagulls wanting to hear his prayer, and dipping my toes in the sand and flicking them, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, and then a lady comes out of nowhere and starts singing with him, and she's never to be seen in the movie again.
Nope.
Like, it's fucking crazy.
I think the thing that sold me on this movie before I watched it was I read a review where someone described it as it's a Muppet movie, but the humans are Muppets, and it's like, that's so accurate. It's a very silly, zany movie in the vein of like a Muppet movie or even a cartoon. It's a rare example of like a live action movie trying to recreate a cartoonish sensibility and energy, and it accomplishes it so perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, it really, really does. And like I said, the two leads, they're so funny. And the hijinks they get into, and, just the one-liners back and forth, like, oh, let's rub our bracelets together. Oh, there's a sharp. Yep, rip the skin. Well, we just got to wear them down.
They have like a lot of like this Paddington-style charm, where the moment they enter anybody's life, they're immediately just like, oh, I feel like so happy. Just having like you two people who are able to go through so much crap together and just like keep smiling and keep being like these fun Midwestern middle-aged ladies. It's so great to see them. And even, I think, I agree with you about to go back to Jamie Dornan, who I'd really only known from the 50 Shades movies, which we talked about the first one ages ago on the show, and how like those movies were like so dull about him trying to be like, oh, I'm sexy and mysterious. And this movie, he's so much more vulnerable in a really good way, where he's trying so hard to woo the Sharon Fisherman character, who is our villain of the movie. He's also played by Kristen Wiig, and I love he's really wants to have like some kind of romantic relationship with her, and then he runs into Star and starts having passionate chemistry with the other Kristen Wiig, and you can see even on Dornan's face like he's actually falling for her. It feels like completely legitimate. There's so many points where you're just like, oh, she's so adorable and sweet, and I just love being around her. It feels really sincere despite it being so fucking silly and stupid.
Just dumb. I mean, it's just dumb, the whole thing. But that's what makes it so good. Like I said, they know it's stupid. They know it's silly. They know that it's preposterous. The whole movie is preposterous. And they know it, and they're fully committed, and they play it straight up, and that's what makes it just magical. Dude, I mean, I laughed out loud several times.
I picked this intentionally because I knew, like, this is an Adam movie. This is a movie that Adam will immediately fall for.
Not only was it an Adam movie, I instantly told my wife about it and a couple other people, and they all watched it, and they're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, what is this fucking movie? I'm like, I don't know, but it's perfect.
We should mention right from the beginning, it immediately hooks you with shout out to the young, once again, apologies for mispronouncing his name, Rain Doi, who plays Yo-Yo, is this little kid who is initially introduced on a bike on a paper route, singing along to the Barbra Streisand, Barry Gibb, Guilty song, and it's so fucking funny that he's so committed to it, and then it turns out he's one of the other henchmen for the evil Kristen Wiig villain character, and he's so fucking funny. Every time he shows up, he's this adorable little pudgy kid who I just love seeing every time. Just like this kid is like comedy gold the moment he does anything with his face.
Yeah, dude, and talk about that. I mean, I messaged you while watching it.
Yes.
Right away. I'm like, all right, chubby little like doesn't really give a shit newspaper boy singing along to Guilty, then pulls up to a tree and is laser scanned doing the underground
Yep.
sort of James Bond base. I was like, I'm sold. And then I messaged you right away too. I was like, now wait a minute. If this is a dream sequence, it's still pretty funny. But if they're really doing this, then this might be the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And they are really doing it. Like, I couldn't fucking believe it. I could not believe, because, you know, it's Kristen Wiig, so I'm like, oh, this is a dream of hers or something. No, there's a Bond villain plot going on at the same time that intersects with these two, like, 40-year-old furniture salesmen from Idaho. I mean, what the fuck? But I will say, I don't know that this movie would have worked as well theatrically. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's too bizarre and too crazy for it to really have made a huge splash at the box office. I really don't think it did. I think watching this VOD or on Hulu is kind of the perfect way, because people can find it that way, and it's only going to grow sort of in cult sort of notoriety, but I don't know that at the theater it would have worked.
Well, I think that's the problem as well. It's just, I don't think that's just an issue of this particular movie being as strange as it is, because, like, watching this, it made me realize just how much, like, theatrical comedy has been a dying genre for so much of it, because, like, I think especially in, like, domestic areas, like, Americans don't want to watch comedies in the theater anymore. It's a bummer, unfortunately, but, like, because there's been so few, like, it used to be, like, back when we were younger, that, like, there would be a blockbuster comedy every summer, and at this point, that has, like, pretty much, like, died out. Like, I think the last big one was, like, a Good Boys, I think, like, pre-pandemic.
Yeah, even that wasn't, like,
I mean, by comparison, like, it nearly made $100 million, which for modern comedies is, like, a breakthrough, honestly. Because
that's probably the last, like, really good one I've seen, too.
Right, but, like, it's just a thing of, like, comedy is such, like, a dying theatrical genre, which is a bummer, especially for, I agree that I don't think this movie would have been necessarily that successful, but this is one of the most cinematic-looking comedies I've seen in ages. Like, the color correction, it's a gorgeous looking, and I think that makes the jokes sell all the more. It's like, oh, this is bright, beautiful, candy-colored Vista Del Mar. Like, right from particularly the big thing where they go to the hotel, and there's the big musical number about how great the hotel is, and it's like them saying motel. It's like, oh wait, that's next door across like 2 football fields of parking lot. Get the fuck out of here. It's so good.
It's so lush colored, and I mean, it feels like what, you know, whenever somebody might fantasize about a beach resort vacation, you know, the beautiful blue sky and blue water and, you know, the bright sand and all that. Like, that's what they did in this movie. That's what they showed you. It looks like a postcard. Like 100%. It looks like they literally just went into the brochure that they get. And it's so perfect, and it's so funny and so well shot. And, you know, the good thing about it is, as a comedy, you know, you kind of want to be endeared to the characters, at least somewhat. Some comedies, you know, the mean-spirited ones, they might still work a little bit. But dude, you're instantly endeared to basically the main 3 leads in this. I think they're great. But to get on to sort of our interconnecting thing, the Damon Wayans Jr. thing, to me was the weakest point of the movie.
I don't disagree. I think because his character is sort of this weird informant who keeps revealing stuff about himself. And I don't think that joke works as well, but I admire Wayans' commitment to that bit. And I think he still has, like, some funny things. I think particularly once he, like, has, like, the fight with Jamie Dornan on the beach. It's, like, this really awkward tumble. And then they're like, well, tell me if you want to get something to eat afterward. And then he goes into the crowd. And he has funny bits. I think that's the thing is, even there are jokes that don't work in this movie. I wouldn't say it's a perfect movie. But at the same time, even the jokes that don't work, there's a real commitment that I respect about everybody involved in the movie. So where it's just, like, it fits the energy. It fits the vibe the movie's going for.
Oh, dude, no, I completely agree. There's a lot of jokes, you know, that are kind of, that wasn't necessarily the funniest, but because of their commitment to it and that they're really going to sell the whole thing, it makes it funny. It makes it work. It makes it more endearing, you know, because you still even get a chuckle out of the bad jokes because of how much they're into it and how much they're trying to sell it. It's just, I don't even know how to, like, describe this movie to somebody, really. Like, you could say, oh yeah, it's about these 2, you know, middle-aged ladies who go to Florida, like kind of how you did in the beginning, the basic synopsis, but it doesn't cover anything. Like, that is such a loose thing to where if you tried, like, well, why do you think I'd like it? Well, there's a music video in the middle of it, and there's killer mosquitoes, and Paperboy James Bond henchman who's also driving a submarine. There's just a little bit of everything. Graphic sex scenes. I mean,
Buried
what
treasure. Which it was
buried
like such a
treasure.
great bit. That's another great visual look, by the way. Just how like they're drifting off on the bar, and the bartender's waving off to them. It leads to the Titanic remix, which is so great.
So funny.
But I think that's the thing. Is like I think the way that I was at least sold on it initially is the way to sell it to somebody. It's just like it's a live action movie that has the sensibilities of like a cartoon or a Muppet movie. It's incredibly silly and zany in a way that like that's not a vibe everybody works with. I could see, but if, like, somebody who likes like a comedy that's willing to be silly, it feels like it's a throwback to, I mentioned Austin Powers earlier, that kind of like character-based comedies that we don't get anymore. Like, they were just like, let's get a star vehicle for a comedian and just have him do like a funny weird character. It's like the exact polar opposite of something like a Master of Disguise, what that's trying to go for. It's like the exact polar opposite, because like this is funny and visually vibrant and you care about the characters along with the comedy. And there's so many, just like it's one of those kitchen sink kind of movies where like even if you don't like an immediate joke, there's going to be like 5 different ones and you're going to like at least 2 or 3 of those probably, honestly, is what I really appealed to. Like, even where like you have like Kristen Wiig is obviously someone who could be just like kind of take over the movie, but I love even like the Barb character and her like side thing where she's like, you know what, I'm going to be adventurous and do weird shit on this trip. Like, I'm going to learn how to surf, I'm gonna hang glide, and I'm gonna meet Tommy Bahama, which is also great. God bless Andy Garcia.
Oh my God, that was the funniest shit too. Andy Garcia's Tommy Bahama. Oh my God, and he's like, a fucking man of the earth. He was hanging out in the jungle and shit. Oh God, yeah, he's dressed like the medicine man, Sean Connery. 2 bits I want to kind of touch on. I don't want to do them bit for bit, but 2 of my favorite bits. One is the rope. When they keep untying themselves from the fucking rope, and Jamie Dornan's going through that whole monologue, and every time he looks back, they're in a completely different pose with the rope like completely over their heads, and he just is completely oblivious to what the hell's going on. So funny. And then the scene on the plane where they start the whole thing about Trish, and it goes throughout the whole plane ride. And then even in the airport, they're still doing it. And she said, no, skid cancer, I'm going to go out my way. So she jumped off the cliff and hit every rock. Like, and then for them to bring it back at the end of the movie.
Yes.
In the most ludicrous, ridiculous way possible. It's so funny and so smart. And like I said, and like you said too, they absolutely 100% commit to everything. Everything. No joke doesn't have a punchline.
No, yeah, I think that's, I would agree with that. I think 2 other bits I would want to spotlight with that are, one, the bit where Barb escapes out of their hotel room and just like gliding along the pool and shit, and Kristen Wiig is like outside. Like, that's great, but also it leads to like, I think probably my favorite sort of like comedic set piece that like that speaks to everything that works about this movie is Barb initially encounters Jamie Dornan's like, let's go into your room and let's have a great sexual conversation after like they'd had like a weird 3-way together. And it's like, I don't know, I want to hide all my supervillain stuff. How about we take a walk? And they go through the walk where they like go underneath the bridge and all this other shit, and they have ice cream. And it's like, okay, well, have a good night. And then she goes back and turns out Star has left and goes to Jamie Dornan, and they have the exact same shot for shot fucking like ice cream and under the bridge both.
The same music and everything.
That just like it speaks to like, one, the great like actual filmmaking of this, where it's just like, oh, these shots match perfectly, and 2, it's so fucking funny they repeat it verbatim, even down to the spy camera taking pictures. And then 2, the submarine thing with the yo-yo character, which is so great. It's just like, yes, you gotta keep going straight, make small movements, keep pushing things, and then like makes the dial-up sound, just like you're all this shit. Like, there's so many fun bits that, like I said, they might not all work for you, but it's just so committed to the bit. It's like, you know what, I need commitment in my life, and Barb and Stargate of Vista Del Mar has that kind of commitment, but to dumb bits, and that's the kind of commitment I need in my life, Adam.
Right, I agree. And the thing is, like you said, not every bit works, but it's bit after bit after bit after bit, and not in sort of an offensive way like you do see in some movies, like you even brought up Master of Disguise, where it's constant bit after bit, but it's just like grating because it doesn't serve the story, it doesn't push the story along or anything. And this movie has a very thin story. It really does. But the story is the bits. The story is the scenarios that happens and the shenanigans these two sort of clueless women get themselves into. And it's propelled forward, like I said, by the preposterity of it all. This movie is ridiculous, dude. It is absolutely ridiculous. It should not work. It should not work. And in less capable hands with less capable stars, I'd argue it wouldn't.
Right, but at the same time, also a big credit to Kristen Wiig, who, like, on SNL, I was always kind of like hit or miss on Kristen Wiig, because sometimes my biggest problem with some of her sketches, especially her recurring characters, would be, it would just, like, stop a show dead. Just have her do, like, Gilly or some of these other characters that just, like, aren't nearly as funny. And it would always work so much better when she was part of, like, a big group sketch, where she was just, like, one ingredient. And I think her movies have shown that she can be, like, that kind of generous star and writer, where, like, with Bridesmaids and even this, like, she, like, is able to be, like, so funny, like she can be, but at the same time, she doesn't hog up the screen time. It's also about, you know, Mumolo or Dornan or everybody else. Even playing two characters, she doesn't, like, really diverge the attention to her in an egocentric way at all.
And completely different characters, and almost unrecognizable as the villain, almost. She plays them completely different on both opposite ends of the just batshit crazy spectrum, and she excels in both. And yeah, I completely agree. She's so much better when she has other like-minded people to bounce off of.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we've seen, you know, like we said with Bridesmaids or this, yeah, she's so good in this movie. Oh my god! And what a capable and good comedy writer she is. Like this is just, I don't know. For two people to sit down and come up with this and fully commit to having it made and starring in it and everything, it's just impressive. Really is what it is.
Well, Adam, I mean, those sound like pretty good final thoughts. Unless you have anything to add about Barb and Star to Vista Del Mar.
I mean, seagull on a tire. Can you hear my prayer? Seagulls in a group. Can you hear my prayer? It's just fucking funny as shit. No, this is just a really great movie. It's a really good sort of gem you can discover on Hulu or streaming or wherever you want to. And I can't think of anybody who would watch this movie and not enjoy themselves in some capacity. I'd be really amazed if someone watched this like that. I fucking hate this movie. Like, I can't see that happening.
Right, I'll say this much. I could see somebody maybe not liking this movie, but I could see somebody at least hopefully giving it a try and respecting the gumption to be what it is. I think even if you don't like love it, I think you'll have enough laughs where it's just like, man, they're really committed. There's enough fun things to where I'd say, like, especially on a Hulu, I think you could at least have some amount of fun with it. Not maybe consistently, but there's just like so many weird things where there's a joke, I think, for everybody. Like, even if you don't like some of the stuff Barb and Star do, there's also just random characters. Like, we even talk about Morgan Freeman's The Crab. It's just this crab that sounds like Morgan Freeman for no reason. It's the puppet. It's so good. I think that's the thing, is it's a movie that really respects, I think, the idea that throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, and seeing what sticks, but still sticking to their, at least our overall idea, which is like, we're making a very pleasant, very positive, very fun comedy, where even like, there's some worries where, like, you know, with like some of the like, say the little yo-yo character, I was worried like, oh, is this just gonna be like, say, an Asian stereotype? And no, it's just like, he's a really fun, bouncy character. There's no, like, even with our villains, there's weird empathy toward everybody in the cast. Even like our asshole characters have some kind of humanity to them that makes it like so joyous to watch. It has, like I said, it has a lot of the same charm of a Paddington movie, where you're watching and it's just like, this is very silly, this is very like over the top, but it's like so genuine in a way that's like, makes it so consistently fun over the course of that hour 45 minutes. I think it's very good. It wasn't my favorite movie of the year, but it's in sort of like a top 5 area, and I agree. I think it's very rewatchable, and I think I would definitely recommend watching it with a group of friends, because the second time I watched it, I did watch it with a group of friends, and it was such a charming, fun time. And even some people who were like, I don't think every joke works, but I respect the weird wavelength the movie's going on. And I think, you know, I would at least say give it a chance. It might not be your thing, but I think you'll at least have some kind of fun with Barb and Star. Go to Vista Del Mar. But now, Adam, before we go to our next segment, here is a message from the ESO crew that we fully endorse.
Welcome to Dr. Geek's Laboratory.
Hello everyone, Dr. Geek here with a shout out to all the scientists who worked tirelessly to bring a COVID-19 vaccine into reality. Let's face it, creating something of this magnitude is a miracle worthy of Dr. McCoy himself. And now, Dr. Geek needs you to do your part. Remember, each shot is one small step back to normal, one giant leap to putting the pandemic behind us. We can do this. For more information, visit vaccines.gov to find your nearest provider.
Alright, everybody, now it's the time in the show where we do the double review, where basically every week Adam and I bring up the best and worst possible double feature from the sort of topic that we're doing. So Adam has 2 good and 2 bad movies from 2021, and I also have 2 good and bad ones to both recommend you see, and other ones we recommend you don't avoid, just completely. So Adam, go ahead and go first. What are your 2 films that are good and the 2 films that are bad?
Okay. Now, like I said before, I haven't seen a lot this year, but there have definitely been some standouts in both categories as far as good and bad. For good, I have another movie that I think really sort of fits the idea of like just a feel-good movie with a lot of heart, a lot of bits in it, that some of them don't always work, but most do, and it's just kind of when it's over, you feel good. And it's the animated Netflix Mitchells versus the Machines. One of my favorite movies of the year still. I absolutely adore this movie. I think it's just full of heart, and maybe being a father to a little girl might, probably adds a little bit to it. And it's fantastic. It's just really, really sweet. My second one is just a perplexing movie that it works with the cast it has, especially, and that's the Bob Odenkirk action comedy Nobody. I can't believe this movie works on as many levels as it does. Like I said, especially with Bob Odenkirk as sort of your main heavy, but he's completely believable in it. Like, I believe he's the baddest motherfucker alive, and it's crazy. It's Bob Odenkirk from Mr. Show. Like, how does this work? And the RZA is his brother. What? Like, it's just, I don't understand why it's so successful, but it's got something to it that I can't even put my finger on. And it might be sort of the absurdity of it all that, this is like basically John Wick with Bob Odenkirk. And it's just super fun, super exciting, great action, great needle drops. I highly, highly recommend it. For anybody who thought it looked dumb, you got to see it. It's also one of my favorite movies of the year. And then for my bad movies, I have 2 sequels. One of them was an Amazon Prime original that came out way too late and relied way too much on basically copying every joke from the original to a lesser degree and completely unfunny degree, and a neutered version of them all. And that is the Coming to America. It is dreadful. It's sort of depressing to watch, and especially when you find out like Ryan Coogler did a script of it and it was turned down in favor of whatever the fuck this is. It's just nothing in this movie works. And for a comedy to not even get a chuckle of sort of how bad it is out of it, it's a death nail for me. I said earlier Cherry might be the worst movie I've seen this year. I take that back. It is Coming to America. It was abysmal and just such a slog to get through. And then my other one is a movie I actually just recently watched like 2 days ago. And I was kind of excited for it because I've seen them all, and I like them to varying levels, of course. But just the idea of the star, again, almost like a nobody, but, Chris Rock, one of the biggest comedians ever, wrote and produced a Saw movie? Like, what is this going to be? And I'll tell you what it is. It's dog shit. It's boring. It's just bland looking. The worst fake facial hair I've seen in a long. Samuel L. Jackson's mustache and Chris Rock's Sharpied on goatee it's laughable. I laughed more at this movie than anything. I mean, That's the voice you're going to go with for the new Jigsaw character? He sounds like a Muppet. Well, detective, you see, truly you're not. I'm like, what are we doing here? And just the idea that Jigsaw doesn't target cops. Really? Have you seen the first 8 movies? Because that's kind of all that happens.
Including director Darren Lynn Bousman, who made Saw 2, which is about a cop being targeted.
Which is about a cop! And 4, which is about a cop!
Also directed by Darren Lynn Bousman.
Also directed by Darren Lynn Bousman. What the fuck? This movie, it's terrible. And it makes such dumb decisions. And they try to like, oh, is it Samuel Jackson? Or is it this guy? Is it his ex-partner? And ultimately, I don't give a shit. And the reveal is even worse. It's so dumb. It's got nothing go for it. It's not exciting. The score is terrible. You finally get the Saw like theme at the very end, and it's muted. It's just, what a bad movie.
Well, I have seen all of your movies. It's interesting, actually. 2 of your movies of your 4 total were the first 2 movies I saw back in the theater, with Nobody and Spiral. I will say Nobody was the first one, and I'm glad it was, because that was such a great welcome back to theaters. It's just like, I agree. I think the movie's very fun, and I think even for like, you mentioned the Mr. Show element of it, but even for someone who also knows Bob Odenkirk for like Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, where he's gone a bit more dramatic, but it's like, can you really be an action star? There is a whole sequence on a bus that shows you exactly how Bob Odenkirk could do that, where it's like, no, he actually trained. You can tell, like, he actually committed to, once again, this particular premise, and he is a genuine badass. I have some issues with that movie, especially toward the ending, but I definitely agree that I think it's a really fun time. I think particularly, you mentioned, like, RZA as his brother, and also Christopher Lloyd as his father. It's, like, the first really good Christopher Lloyd thing I've seen in so long. I was so happy with particularly the ending bit of that. Stellar. And then, yeah, Spiral, I agree, is really terrible. I wouldn't say it's not the worst Saw movie. I think that's the thing, is it's at least not the worst, because I think it's trying to do a few different things. But I agree that particularly with the reveal, which I guess we won't spoil here, but I'll just say it becomes plainly obvious because the way the movie's directed, it shows you certain things about other people who might be suspects, except for that person.
Well, 1,000%. You know, and not just, we're not going to go out right now and say who it is, but it's the only suspect that's sort of demise is not shown. And you're supposed to be like, oh no! Like, it's just so fucking stupid.
It's quite stupid there. And then with your other 2, I agree Coming to America was such a massive disappointment, especially considering we talked about Eddie Murphy earlier this year because of that movie. And it was from Craig Brewer, who also made Dolomite Is My Name, which we both loved so much. And
yes.
It is such like a stark contrast to go to that movie, which compared to Dolomite Is My Name, which is like, oh my god, like it looks so great and everyone's so committed. It is, I agree, such a sad affair, and it looks like dog shit. It was supposed to be for theaters, but it looks like it was made to be dumped to streaming. It looks about that bad. And also just like some very sad use of like, we loved Wesley Snipes in Dolomite. And this movie, it is just like a really one note back and forth. Like, he's one of the few new characters and just feels like, oh, this is your new material, and you're so like ashamed of it you have to like recycle these old bits where everybody comes back.
Don't forget about the Arsenio Hall witch doctor character. That's new.
Right. I mean, that's also new and essentially a great character we all loved, clearly. Not at all on every conceivable level. But my biggest problem with that movie is there's a point where he talks to his wife from the first movie who comes back, and he's so surprised about, like, oh my god, I can't believe you've been with other men before me? And it's like, motherfucker, the plot of the first movie is that you find out she's engaged to, like, fucking Eric LaSalle. You forgot that part of the movie? The crux, the emotional thing that made me love that movie so much? What the fuck?
Right, no, but instead they give you a really, really piss-poor de-aged sex scene with him and Leslie Jones.
Oh, that has, like, a lot of weird implied, like, rape stuff and drugging and all that other shit?
Yeah.
And then Mitchell vs. Machines, I did like. I wasn't as hot on it, but I think because the internet culture stuff, I think, felt a lot more pandering, I think. And it didn't, like there were literally points where they'll just cut to memes and shit like that I wasn't as big a fan of. But I love the animation style, and there's a lot of, like, fun, like, character dynamics and stuff. I did quite enjoy that movie, but I have the hot take of, I don't think it's one of the best of the year necessarily, but it's quite enjoyable. But I think it's time I moved on to my picks. So I'll start with my two smaller movies that have been streaming or on VOD to some extent. I have first a movie called Shiva Baby, which is a movie about this woman, this bisexual college student, who has to go to a funeral with her family of a family friend. And it's more of like a comedy, especially with the initial way it starts. But they go to the wake after this funeral, and there's a weird tension that comes up where both her ex-girlfriend and also the married man who she's having an affair with are both at the wake at the same time. And it is this weird thing where it's a very funny movie. There's all sorts of like funny, like especially like humor about being around your relatives, and it's a very Jewish family. There's such a huge tension at the same time. It almost feels like it's a like sitcom episode crossed with a horror movie. It's such a weird, interesting, unique movie. I'd recommend to anybody. It has like a lot of stellar laughs, but also just like weird, like social situation chills at the same time. And it's all within 77 minutes. It's a very short movie that I would firmly recommend to anybody out there. And then the other one is a horror comedy that is also, that is based around a very silly premise called Slacks, which is on Shudder. And the basic premise is this very trendy store is getting a new pair of jeans on the market, and everyone's preparing for it. They have the whole store on lockdown, so everybody can like get the store ready in time for like the big reveal. And the jeans, as it turns out, are alive and eat human beings. Now I know that sounds fucking silly, and the movie knows it's very silly, but at the same time, there are a lot of really good kills in it. I like all of the actors and the characters a lot. It has some interesting themes even about like capitalism and how like sort of like these stores, in particular like these clothing brands, tend to abuse their workers in other countries. And shit like that. It surprisingly has like a lot of interesting commentary that I wouldn't have expected. And it's a very clearly low budget movie, but they genuinely convince you these jeans are alive. It is like stunning that they're able to do it as well as they are. And also very short, 76 minutes long. And so that's Slacks, spelled SLAXX, is surprisingly a very good movie. And then for my bad, I have two movies actually from Netflix that one was very bad in a way that it was even worse than I kind of expected, and the other one was a real disappointment that just came out actually also a few days ago. For the really bad one, it is Malcolm and Marie, which is a movie that stars John David Washington and Zendaya, two very talented people. And it's a movie that was made during COVID, and the entire premise of it is he's the director and she is a star who he is having a relationship with, and they both come back to his house after a premiere of his movie, and the entire movie is sort of like a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf style like play kind of thing, where they're like having conversations back and forth with each other, and he's so enraged about the reviews that his movie has gotten. And it's made by Sam Levinson, who is the son of Barry Levinson, and two is a guy who's like very famous right now for Euphoria, which also stars Zendaya, the show, on HBO. And I found this movie to be kind of insufferable in a way that's so much of like, it's very inside Hollywood, where this is his second film, and his first film, Assassination Nation, which I haven't seen, but I know has gotten very polarizing reviews. And it feels so much just like, this is just an exercise in you trying to vent about like all the reviews your movie got. And it's this really frustrating movie where the actors are really good. It's shot beautifully. It's in black and white, and the cinematography is gorgeous. But it's all this ego exercise of this director just trying to really shout about so much, especially they bring like some racial implications into that. And Sam Levinson, spoilers, not a black guy, but he has this black actor trying to kind of like speak about people commenting on race. And it's just like, dude, what the fuck are you even doing? It is dog shit. And it is such like an insufferable mess that wastes a lot of great talent. And then the other bad one is one that kind of fits sort of like with Nobody, in terms of like it kind of has the appeal of like a John Wick movie. But imagine a John Wick movie where they really cared about the lore more than the action sequences. And that's the problem with Gunpowder Milkshake, which has a really talented cast. Karen Gillan's in it, Lena Headey, And they play like an assassin mother and daughter who the mother leaves very early on, and so Karen Gillan's become like a hitman assassin for Paul Giamatti, who's also in there. And there's a whole other thing where like her sort of family of assassins involves of the adopted family of sorts involves like Angela Bassett and Michelle Yeoh and Carla Gugino, who work at like a library. And it's like, oh, this sounds like a lot of fun. And the action sequences are very so-so. Like, there's so much, like, there's a lot of, like, really poorly done action bits, and there's some stuff that's kind of fun, but it feels like it's so secondary to so much of, like, let's be quirky about being, like, oh, like, they meet at a diner, and they talk to the waitress about, like, oh, you want me to lighten your load? And they take the guns away, like, it's a neutral space, and then at the library, it's like, oh, you want to check out a book? How about Jane Austen? It's, like, the small book that has, like, oh, it's, like, a gun in it, and all this shit. It's so cutesy, in a way it just feels like it really just slows down the whole thing, and it looks very gorgeous, and the actresses are all committed, but at the same time it's a real disappointment, not just because of how good that cast is, but also even the director. I apologize if I forgot his name, but he's an Israeli director who did Big Bad Wolves from a few years ago, which is a great underrated kind of like Tarantino style thriller that like had a lot of promise, and this is his follow-up film so many years later, and it is so dull. And it's so just like, it's someone, like I said, watching a John Wick movie and getting the complete wrong idea. It's the antithesis to a nobody on every level.
Well, big shocker. I haven't seen any of those. I remember hearing just abysmal things about that Malcolm and Marie movie, probably from you. But I do remember just people just bombing that movie because it sounds pretentious as fuck too. Like, and I get, you know, I don't really want to watch a pretentious movie about the plight of a Hollywood director. Like, I don't give a fuck. And that's a real bummer about Gunpowder Milkshake. I mean, talk about just having a stellar cast and apparently just blowing it. I mean, that really, really sucks, because I do agree with you about Big Bad Wolves as well. That's a criminally underseen sort of gem from whenever it came out, like 2018 or 2017.
No, that was like 2013. That's the thing. It's been such a gap since he did
Holy
his last movie.
shit,
Yeah.
that was that long ago.
I know.
Wow.
Crap, by the way, the dead director, who I apologize, I'm going to probably fuck up his name that I just found here, is Navot Papashato? Apologies once again.
Why would you even try?
I don't know. I just wanted to put it out there. Once again, sir, really like Big Bad Wolves. Very disappointed by Gunpowder Milkshake.
Yeah, and both your good ones I definitely want to see. In fact, to the point where I might actually watch Slacks tonight. Because you had recommended it, and I just haven't gotten around to it. Well, I got a little bit of free time tonight, so maybe that's what I'll do.
And once again, it's only 76 minutes long, baby.
Yeah, right. So that's right up my alley. But yeah, both your bad ones sound bad, sound atrocious, and I'm really sort of interested in both of your good. So good for you.
Well, thank you all for listening to all that. We also want to thank some other people who contributed to the show, like Chris Oliver, who did the intro and outro music used for our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thor Lally for the great artwork that we have for our show. You can follow him at Night of Water, that's night with a K, _of_water on Twitter, and he has a few other places where he posts art for all the great artwork he does besides our great logo. And also thanks to our Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/TEDBpod, where for just $1 a month you get to do stuff like listen to bonus podcasts, like we mentioned on The Edge of Relevance, where we've covered some recent movies like Black Widow, Fast 9, a bunch of stuff since around March, where the first one we did was the Zack Snyder Justice League. We've been covering a lot of big streaming and theatrical releases that have come out this year, but also we'll be having some interesting other bonus content, like we'll be doing Telebilsion, is what we're going to call it, where basically Adam and I are going to watch a TV show that the other one recommended to them, where Adam's going to watch Gravity Falls, and I'm going to watch Barry, and we'll be talking back and forth about our first viewings of that and why the other one really likes the show. But also, like I said, you get to vote in polls for topics we cover. This week, we're going to put it up to our patrons to discuss which year from the 2000s we cover movies from. So that area between 2000 and 2009, and these choices are between the year 2001 and 2008. One from beginning of the decade, one from the end of the decade.
Yeah. I'm good with either on those. Usually, you know, when we come up with these polls, I want to sway one way or the other. That one, I'm good with either.
They're two very good film years. We'll be
Yeah,
curious
for sure.
to talk about one of them. And you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at DEDVPod. And also we would recommend you send any feedback to us there or at doubleedgeddoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And if you can't support us monthly for just $1 a month on the Patreon, you could also help us out by buying merchandise with our logo on at the ESOT Public Store. There'll be a link in the description for that, where you can buy a shirt or a mug or any sort of other things with our great logo pasted on there. So it would really help us out because we get a bit of a kickback. So what should they do, Adam?
Seagulls on the beach, will you buy our merch?
See, well, change it up a bit. Yeah.
Hey, why not? Why not?
Sure, especially because you were so crestfallen after doing it for so long. Why not? Why not just change it up a bit every time I suggest you do something like that? Let's make that a thing. Let's make fetch happen.
Yeah.
But for more of my individual antics, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as @NotTheWho'sTommy. And also I do some writing at both marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com.
Yes, and you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Atom or Adam. It's ATOM_OR_ADAM, or on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON. I know for synergy reasons that I should just have them all be the same, but I'm not paying for a pro Letterboxd account, so eat a dick.
I guess. If you want to do that. I don't know.
If that's what you're into, whatever.
Whatever, yeah, we're not judging. But continue to please listen to us over with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on ESO, why not listen to the other great shows on there? But also dig into our archives on the Podbean feed for the first 60 or so episodes we did before we joined ESO. And nothing else you can't, buy our merch or subscribe to the Patreon. The completely free way to help us out is to rate, review, and share the show around because that gives us more visibility.
Seagull on the tire, won't you share our shit?
I mean, you have a lot of wing space. You can fly around quite well. I can just share the show. That's the real Twitter.
They're flying rats. Come on.
Unlike our listeners who are not flying rats.
Beautiful, beautiful, normal rats.
Yes. But now, Adam, before we go, it is time to do our picking for next week, where every week Adam and I have 2 good movies, 2 bad movies. We switch off on the quality for that for the following episode. In this case, Adam has 2 good movies. I have 2 bad ones for our topic. And that topic, which was chosen by our Patreon subscribers, is Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme, who Adam is a big fan of. Yes. Right, Adam's a big fan. And I am a bit more of a novice, though I've been catching up a bit with Adam here. We have some movie nights we do off mic, and we've been watching a bit more of Van Damme. I've been studying up. I've been taking notes about Mr. Van Damme and his career a bit. And, Adam has the 2 good movies, and he's put a number between 1 and 10 associated with both of his good movies. I've done the same for my bad movies, and each of us will pick a number between 1 and 10 that gets us the good and bad choice. But keep in mind, we have the Godfather rule, where Adam and I, from now until May of 2022, which will be our next anniversary episode, we have the option to put up a veto if we hear a choice and say, we don't really want to cover that one necessarily. I'm not a big fan. And the way that we end up deciding this is the person who has the 2 choices, after they read that first choice that is closest to whatever number, will ask, do you want to take the cannoli? And the other person who was picking the numbers will either say, no, I don't want to pick the cannoli, or actually, I'll take the cannoli. And thus, we do not cover that movie and go to the other choice that's available.
Yeah.
So, Adam, for your 2 good choices, I think I'm gonna, in honor of our favorite duo, Barb and Star, I'm gonna do 2.
All right. At number 3, I have one that is based off a comic book. A lot of people don't maybe realize it's a comic book film, or that, there even is a comic book with this title. I have the sci-fi time travel Time Cop.
All right, yeah, this is one I've seen. And I quite enjoyed it a lot, so...
Do you want to take the cannoli, buddy?
I do not want to take that cannoli.
Alrighty. Well, your alternate choice would have been, at number 10, I have one of his considered classics. I have Bloodsport.
I have seen that one. That one is quite fun. I do like Bloodsport quite a bit. Featuring future Academy Award winner Forrest Whitaker in a very small role.
Yep.
I think like the same year he did Good Morning Vietnam. So it's like baby-faced fucking Forrest Whitaker.
Chasing Van Damme around Hong Kong.
Oh, good lord. It literally in a sequence that's like straight out of a Beatles movie. It's tremendous. But Adam, I've got the two bad. So why don't you go ahead and pick a number 2, 1, and 10 for those choices as well?
Well, I was gonna say, and because of Cherry, I'll pick a fucking 0, but that doesn't work.
That doesn't quite work.
Doesn't work. So in favor of Chirk, I'll pick a 10.
All right. At number 9, I have one that I have seen with Adam that I guess is technically bad, but we had so much fun with it, and I can't wait to discuss it on the show. I have 1990's Lionheart.
Yes, that dude's gonna kill you, Lionheart. Don't you know that? Yes.
So Adam, I'm going to take a wild guess, and you're saying you're not going to take the cannoli?
Oh, fuck no, I'm not taking the cannoli on that one. Or in honor of Lionheart, you should have offered me KFC.
Oh, good. Good fucking God. The weirdest sponsorship ever in that movie. Well, if you had taken the cannoli, we would have ended up with, at number 2, a one I haven't seen, but I've heard not the best things about, Cyborg.
That's a good call. I have fondness for Cyborg, but it's kind of boring. So I don't think we would have really had too much other than like the couple bits of trivia. So I think we lucked out here.
I mean, look, we'll have so much to say about Lionheart and Time Cop, to be fair.
We could do a Lionheart episode.
Perhaps. But we'll be talking about that in Time Cop next week. So that ends the show. And in honor of that, everybody, go ahead and have yourself a nice vacation in Vista Del Mar, but make sure to avoid the mosquitoes.
Seagulls in a group. We'll see you soon.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping for the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.